Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing how to create 5 cards using busy pattern papers. Sometimes it can be a challenge. We love our pattern papers, but then we don't know how to use them. And so I'm going to be sharing some ideas today. I'm going to be using this vintage patchwork signature wallet from Funky Fossil Designs. It's their 7th signature wallet and it contains a combination of 5x7 pattern papers, a set of rub-ons, a stencil that's also 5x7. You've also got a lovely stamp set that also has a coordinating diamond shaped die and stencil that was in the back of the packet, which I forgot to flip over and show you. But yeah, you can see these papers are gorgeous. Now, you don't need this kit to create these cards. I'm sure you've got pattern papers in your stash that are neglecting being used. So dig them out and follow along today and see if you get some inspiration for ways to use them. As part of the collection, there was also these Ephemera Essential Rub Ons, which I will be using today, another little stamp set, and then this gorgeous Patchwork Heart that's a triple layered stencil. And if you're like me and you struggle to use those pattern papers, there's also an 8x8 paper pad that goes along with the collection that you can purchase separately. So you'll always have those designs and spares of them in your stash. So hopefully that'll encourage you to use them as well. There's also a couple of new Stella pastes. I won't be using these today in today's projects, but the colours are gorgeous and they do complement the papers really well if that's something that you're interested in. So let's get started with our first card, and I'm going to first of all trim the pattern paper down. All of the cards that I'm making today are going to be US A2 sized, so I'm going to trim my pattern paper down to 3 3/4 inches by 5. And one of the best ways to break up a busy pattern paper is using vellum. So that's what I'm going to do for the first card. I've got these gorgeous scalloped stitch dies in my stash, and I'm just going to run that through my die cut machine. This is the mini Spellbinders Scout die cut machine, so it's great for smaller dies. And you could really use any shape for this. We just want to create something that's going to break up the busy pattern of the paper. Now, the great thing about rub-ons is that you can adhere them to many different surfaces, vellum being one of them. So I'm going to use this Patchwork Heart rub-on, and I'm just going to stick that onto the vellum. I'm just kind of getting a rough idea of where I want it to be on my card, because I want the heart in the centre but slightly raised up. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the lollipop stick that's provided to just get a really good transfer by rubbing that and applying pressure all over it. And then you can peel off the backing tape. And then you're left with this gorgeous vellum piece with that rub-on. I'm going to add a sentiment from the stamp set. So this one says, "Family is a patchwork of love." And I'm going to stamp it in some VersaFine Clair Nocturne black ink. And then I'm going to heat set it with some clear embossing powder. And that's why I use my anti-static powder bag first of all. I'm going to quickly heat set that from underneath. And then I'm going to add some foam tape behind the pattern paper and pop that up on my card front. And that's just going to give it a little bit of dimension. So once that's stuck down, we then need to give careful thought to how we're going to stick the vellum down, because vellum's notoriously difficult to adhere without the adhesive showing through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop some foam tape behind the heart, and then I'm going to use that to hold the vellum in place. So it won't be completely stuck down, but it'll be held firmly in place by that foam tape. Now I'm going to use one of the rub-ons from the Ephemera Essentials rub-ons, and I'm just going to use one of these stitchings, and I'm just going to add that to the vellum along the line of the stitch detail that's already there on the die cut. So that's going to help me keep this nice and straight. I'm only going to need the one strip of stitching, and I'm going to apply some at the top of the vellum and some at the bottom of the vellum. Now you definitely could do this before you stick it down, but this was a bit of an afterthought for me, and so it's easy enough just to add the rub-on using the lollipop stick, and yeah, I can still push that down and get really good contact with the vellum. If you miss a little bit, you can pop the rub-on back down and just reattach it, and then that is the first card finished. So for the second card, I'm going to use this gorgeous piece of pattern paper, and I really love this design. So it does kind of seem a shame to cut it down, but I am going to trim it down in a way that keeps the largest part of that floral section. So I'm still trimming it down to be 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And then I'm going to use the rub-ons to create my own ephemera. So I've got this lovely patchwork butterfly. I've just fussy cut it out from the sheet of rub-ons. I've adhered it to this white piece of cardstock. And then I'm just going to use my Cutter-Bee scissors just to fussy cut it out. And then that way we'll have our own embellishment or ephemera piece that we can use on the card front. So don't be afraid to do this with some of the rub-ons. you can definitely turn them into ephemera-like pieces. I'm also going to use vellum on this card as well, because again, it will break up the busy background and allow me to add a sentiment. So I'm going to use the sentiment from the stamp set, which says "You are a diamond," and I'm going to heat emboss it on the vellum using some metallic platinum embossing powder from Wow. So I'm just stamping it with some Clair embossing ink. I made sure to use my anti-static powder bag first of all, and then I've quickly heat set the sentiment, and you can see it looks really lovely and shiny. And the platinum embossing powder really complements these papers really nicely. I think the gold would have been too bright and silver wouldn't have been very visible. So yeah, the platinum really looked good with these papers. I'm just going to tack the vellum in place using some double-sided tape on the back, and then I'm going to pop this straight down directly onto my card blank. I'm just using some Barley Arts glue here. I'm then going to add a little bit of glue to the body of the butterfly so that I can keep the dimension on the wings, and then I'm going to add a few flat back sequins and using a wax pencil there just to move them around. And then that is the second card finished, and I really love how this one turned out. So for the third card, I'm going to use one of the more muted tones of pattern paper as a more of a background element. And then I'm going to use that gorgeous floral piece again for the front. So I've just trimmed them down, and then I'm just going to use my scissors just to distress the edges of this paper. I really want to help it look a little bit more vintage and a bit more rustic. And so distressing the edges really adds to that effect. I'm then just going to add some vintage photo distress oxide with a blending brush just around all of those roughed up edges that we've created. And then I'm going to add a few little rub-ons to the background of the pattern paper. Now, the paper was already busy enough and the rub-ons really just got lost in the background. So I definitely would have skipped this step if I was recreating this card. I used the buttons and then I added some of the thread through the buttons. So it did kind of create a cool effect, but it does get a little bit lost in the paper. I'm then just going to use my reverse tweezers just to kind of curl around some of the edges and create some faux tears. And then again, I'm going to come in with some vintage photo distress oxide and make sure that there's no white paper showing. And then I'm going to add some foam tape behind the piece of pattern paper just to give it a little bit of dimension. So I'm just going to attach that on a slight angle as well so that the paper from behind just pops through. I'm going to add a sentiment that says "Thanks for everything" from the Sentimental Sticker Stack book, and then I'm just going to add a few adhesive pearls onto the finished card. And then that is the third card finished. So for the fourth card, we're going to use some of our scraps up for this one. So I've got a little piece from that diamond one, and then that lovely flower is still exposed. So to really highlight that, I'm going to use one of the frame rub-ons, and I'm going to make sure that I can frame that gorgeous flower. And then again, you just use the lollipop stick just to press down and get even coverage. You could definitely use a bone fold for this as well. And then once I remove the backing tape, I can then go ahead and just trim it down so that we've got that lovely piece of again, custom made ephemera really. So that looks really, really pretty. I'm also going to add some stitching to this piece of plainer paper from the kit. And I'm going to use some of the Ephemera Essential Rub Ons on a couple of pieces that I die cut using the Funky Fossil Ephemera die set. That's an older die set, but I'm sure many of you will have it in your stash or something very similar that can kind of create tickets and postage stamps. I've used some of the diamond stamps from the kit as well, and again some vintage photo distress oxide and some tattered rose distress oxide. And again, I just really want to create a vintage vibe. On the postage stamp, I'm going to use some Wow embossing ink, and again I'm going to use some of that platinum embossing powder, and that's just going to add again a little bit of texture and interest. These are really just additional background pieces, so it doesn't need to be perfect. And if you don't have any dies like this in your stash, then you can create your own using punches or just cutting out little shapes, just something to add a little bit of interest to the background. You could even use the ephemera and then fussy cut those frames out. So yeah, lots of different ways to create a very similar effect, but all I'm trying to do is create some ephemera just to add into the background. I've distressed the edges of that piece of paper and I'm just sticking that down now, and then I'm going to add some foam tape to that floral frame that we've created. But first of all, I'm going to stick down one piece of the ephemera because I want that pop behind the frame, and then I'm going to trim the postage stamp down and then just stick that down with a little bit of glue. Again, I'm going to add a sentiment from the Sentimental Sticker Stack book, and I'm just popping a little bit of foam on the one side and some glue on the other. I'm just going to add another rub-on along the edge of the card panel just to kind of attach all the layers together. And then I'm going to use some of these rub-ons that are the beautiful patchwork flowers that, again, I've put onto paper and then created my own ephemera with them. And I'm just going to stick those down onto the top left-hand corner of that frame. I'm going to add a few little gems to finish. And then that is the fourth card finished, and I really love how this turns out as well. So the fifth and final card for today's video is going to be featuring this stencil, which I've then used to emboss the vellum. So you've got that really subtle diamond effect on the vellum, and it looks so pretty. I've also die cut a heart shape from one of the pieces of the pattern paper featuring the bird, and I've got a sentiment ready to go from the Sentimental Sticker Stack book. As I mentioned earlier, vellum is tricky to glue down, so I'm going to add glue to the areas where I know they're going to be covered up. So I can add quite a bit of glue to the centre and then a dot of glue in each corner, and I'm going to use my magnets just to hold it down while the glue grabs. So you do just want to give it a few minutes because the vellum will take a while just to stick. I'm then going to glue down that lovely pattern paper to the centre of the card, and I'm going to pop my sentiment onto some foam tape, and then I'll finish the card by adding a few flat back pearls to each of the corners. If you're not sure how to emboss with a stencil, I'll leave a link to a video, but there is the finished card, the fifth finished card for today. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that it's helped you to see ways that you can use your busy pattern papers, whether you've got this kit or not. I'm also going to leave all the products that I've used in the description box below, so don't forget to check those out if anything's caught your eye. As always, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you've enjoyed this tutorial. Leave me a comment and let me know which card was your favourite from today's video. And if you're not subscribed to my channel already, then please consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.